Have you ever wondered how Rome, a rising city-state in Italy, managed to conquer one of the most influential civilizations in history, Greece? This wasn't just another war. It was a game of politics, diplomacy, and shifting power that would change the course of Western civilization forever. Stick around until the end, because today we'll explore not just the battles, but the motives, the strategies, and the surprising twists behind Rome's conquest of Greece. Welcome to Historical Veils, where we peel back the layers of history to reveal the untold stories of the past. Let's dive right in. To understand how Rome conquered Greece, we have to first rewind several centuries to see where Greece was and where Rome was heading. Greece, as you might know, had experienced its golden age much earlier. We're talking about the Greece of philosophers like Socrates and military strategists like Alexander the Great. But by the 3rd century BCE, the Greece we're talking about was a shadow of its former self. The once great city-states, Athens, Sparta, Corinth, had all lost much of their influence. And then there was Macedon, the powerhouse that had briefly unified Greece under Alexander. After his death in 323 BCE, his vast empire fragmented, leaving Greece divided and weak. At the same time, Rome was on the rise. Rome, still a republic at the time, had just come out of the Punic Wars victorious against Carthage. They had control over much of the Western Mediterranean and were now looking east. But why would Rome, now the dominant power in the West, care about Greece? What would eventually drive them to cross the Adriatic Sea and get involved in Greek affairs? At first, Rome had no direct reason to conquer Greece. After all, Greece was far from their territory and wasn't a major threat. So why did they bother? It started with the alliances. Rome, always strategic, had a habit of making friends and enemies in high places. During the First Macedonian War, 215 to 205 BCE, Rome allied itself with the Aetolian League, one of many Greek factions, against Philip V of Macedon. This wasn't about land, yet it was about influence. Rome was learning how Greek politics worked. They began to see how fragmented the region was, and they realized something. Greece was ripe for control, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. The question remains, what pushed Rome into full-scale war with Greece? The real turning point came during the Second Macedonian War, 200 to 197 BCE. Philip V of Macedon, seeing Rome distracted by its wars with Carthage, tried to expand his influence into the Greek world and beyond. His ambitions brought him into direct conflict with Rome's growing sphere of influence in the Eastern Mediterranean. Rome, of course, wasn't going to sit idly by, but in typical Roman fashion, they didn't launch into war immediately. Instead, they used diplomacy and propaganda. They promised the Greek city-states that they would liberate them from the Macedonian king's rule. Imagine hearing that if you were a Greek living under the shadow of Macedon, a foreign power promising you freedom and autonomy. It must have sounded too good to be true. But here's where it gets interesting. Rome wasn't just promising freedom. They were sowing the seeds of dependence. The Greek city-states would never again be as independent as they once were. Even though they thought Rome was coming to their aid, what they didn't realize was that they were trading one master for another. Could the Greeks have known they were being manipulated? Or was the offer of Roman freedom too tempting to refuse? In 197 BCE, everything came to a head. The Second Macedonian War had been raging for several years, and now the decisive moment arrived at the Battle of Cynoscephalae. On one side was Philip's Macedonian army, famous for its phalanx formation, a nearly impenetrable wall of spears that had dominated battlefields for centuries. On the other side were the Roman legions, highly trained, flexible, and ruthless. Here's where the brilliance of the Roman military strategy shone. The Macedonian phalanx was powerful on flat ground, but on rough, hilly terrain like Cynoscephalae, it became disorganized. The Romans exploited this weakness. They broke through the phalanx, outflanking the Macedonians and crushing them with their superior maneuverability. The result? A decisive Roman victory. Philip was forced to sign a peace treaty, and Greece was now under the control of Roman diplomacy. Rome didn't annex Greece outright, not yet, but they had made their mark, and the Greek city-states were starting to realize that Rome was there to stay. But was this just the beginning of something even more destructive for Greece? After the Battle of Cynoscephalae, Rome presented itself as the benevolent liberator of Greece. At the Isthmian Games in 1960 BCE, a Roman general declared Greece free in front of cheering crowds. Imagine the relief and joy. The people believed they were finally rid of Macedonian control. control. But here's the twist. While Rome promised freedom, they were setting themselves up as the ultimate power brokers in the region. Rome didn't annex Greece immediately. Instead, they kept their influence indirect, using diplomacy, alliances, and manipulation. Think of it like this. Greece was free, but only as long as they did what Rome wanted. Over time, Roman influence grew stronger, as city-states that resisted found themselves facing Roman intervention, sometimes in the form of an army, sometimes through political pressure. But the real blow to Greek independence would come years later, in a final conflict that would change everything. By 171 BCE, a new Macedonian king, Perseus, had risen to power. He was ambitious, like his predecessors, and sought to restore Macedon's influence. This was the spark that lit the Third Macedonian War. Perseus thought he could rally the Greek states to his cause, but Rome had been working behind the scenes for years. The once proud Greek city-states were too divided and too weakened to mount a unified resistance. Rome swiftly defeated Perseus at the Battle of Pydna in 168 BCE. The Macedonian army, once feared, was crushed, and Perseus was captured. This time, Rome was done playing games. Macedon was formally dissolved, and Rome began to dismantle what little remained of Greek autonomy. But Rome's conquest of Greece didn't end with Macedon. It wasn't until 146 BCE, during the final devastating conflict, that Greece's fate would be sealed. What would push Rome to deliver the final brutal blow to Greece? In 146 BCE, the Achaean League, a federation of Greek city-states, made a desperate bid for independence. They were no match for Rome, but their pride and desire for freedom led them to revolt. Rome's response was swift and merciless. Lucius Mummius, the Roman general, led his forces into Greece and crushed the rebellion at the Battle of Corinth. What happened next was nothing short of brutal. Corinth, one of the most important and prosperous cities in Greece, was razed to the ground. Its treasures were looted, its people either killed or sold into slavery. The city was left in ruins as a warning to any who would dare challenge Roman authority. From that point on, Greece was no longer just under Roman influence. It became a province of the Roman Republic, and the dream of Greek independence was dead. But here's the irony. While Rome had conquered Greece militarily, Greece's cultural influence would conquer Rome in return. Here's where history plays one of its greatest tricks. While Rome had destroyed Greece militarily, they couldn't resist the allure of Greek culture. Greek philosophy, art, and literature became deeply ingrained in Roman life. The Romans adopted Greek gods, reinterpreted Greek myths, and built their architecture in the Greek style. It's said that Greece, though captive, took her conqueror captive. The Greeks may have lost their independence, but their ideas lived on through Rome. And through Rome, those ideas spread across Europe and eventually into the very culture of the United States today. In many ways, the Greece that Rome conquered continues to shape our world, from democracy and philosophy to art and architecture. And that, my friends, is how Rome conquered Greece. It wasn't just a history of military might. It was a tale of political cunning, cultural exchange, and the inevitable march of history. Greece's legacy lived on through Rome, and in many ways, it still influences our world today. Before you go, there's more to explore. I've written a detailed article on today's topic. Find the link to my website in the description. You'll also find my official social media links and my second channel, Historical Veils Shorts, for short videos. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it, and drop a comment with your thoughts or topic suggestions. Please subscribe and turn on notifications. I upload a new video every Saturday morning. I spend the rest of the week researching, editing, and responding to your comments. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep exploring the past to understand the present.